Mūsų karta pirmoji, supratusi, kaip iš lėto kenkiame gamtai. Ir vienintelė, žinanti, kad dar yra laiko ją išsaugoti. Apsaugokime mūsų visų ateitį. Ergo.
The laws of physics, the laws of life. Laws connect everything. We think that to be legal advisors, we must live under the same philosophy, adapting to connect and connecting to adapt.
Nepraleiskite laiko veltui. Nauji kino festivaliuose kritikus ir žiūrovus sužavėję filmai. Elito kinas. Ketvirtadienio vakarais per LRT+.
Kad būtum, reikia kito. Kino Pavasaris. Kovo 24, balandžio 3 dienomis visoje Lietuvoje. Didysis partneris Ergo draudimo grupė. Informaciniai partneriai LRT 15 min žmonės.
Hello, hello. Good evening from us. Good afternoon to you. And welcome to the 27th edition of Kino Pavasaris. I would like to give a very warm welcome on behalf of the festival and of our whole team and of our audience, physical and virtual, to Atom Egoyan and Arsinée Khanjian. Welcome. The film is part of our thematic program. It is a film that we all watched with our programming team, and we felt it absolutely necessary to include. Our theme for this year's edition is to exist, you must coexist. Which is, I mean, it is quite obvious, but it needs to be discussed and needs to be observed through art and through cinema. But before I actually go into perhaps the specificities of calendar and how it might relate to the theme, I would like to, first of all, maybe go down a bit down memory lane, because looking at this year, it's nearly 30 years since calendar. And Atom, Arsinée, I wanted to ask how the idea behind the film came about. I know perhaps you can speak about the continuation, or rather from after the success of The Adjuster, and that background that I read somewhere that the idea for the film came while you were walking down Rue de Martyrs in Paris.
Yeah, I mean, look, the idea came about because there was an opportunity. And the opportunity was that The Adjuster had won the Moscow Film Festival, and the prize was a million rubles to make a film in the Soviet Union. And at the time, Armenia was part of the Soviet Union, as was Lithuania. And but then what happened is, over the next few months, the Soviet Union fell apart, and the ruble useless, and so there was no opportunity to use this prize. But then a producer at ZDF heard about the project and offered us a smaller amount of money to do this. And it was a very rare opportunity where we got to make something which was completely both rigid, very organized, but completely free and improvised within it. And we were dealing also with this amazing moment in our own country where it was free, that there was this moment of we were newly independent. So we were alone in these places. We were quite, it was just very, very intoxicating to somehow talk about this question of identity and relationships, given our own backgrounds as Armenians, diasporan Armenians, coming back to this country that was newly free.
But not only that, and I think when we earlier kind of laughed when you said, in order to exist, we must coexist. it was not out of the obviousness of it. It was out of the irony of what you said, which is absolutely true. And when you're referring to the year when we went back to shoot calendar in 10 days, Armenia was already in fight along with the Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh enclave that was an independent enclave oblast, as you would know historically the term, and the Azeri, also newly independent country, was fighting Artsakh, the indigenous historical people of that land. For us, this notion of coexistence started, of course, with our history of genocide. 1915, 1918, Armenians, citizens of the Ottoman Empire, with the Turkish government, the Ottoman Turkish government killing 1.5 million. So we carried generationally that need to talk about our culture, our survival and all that. But ironically, 30 years later, we are now remembering what happened in Armenia later on when we decided to make the film in order to pay tribute to our culture and history and identity in that sense. But also, ironically, again, 2 years ago, before the Ukraine was attacked, just out of sheer greed of Russian imperialism, or in the head of few Russian imperialists still, if we should not forget that there was a very vicious attack and on Nagorno-Karabakh again. So if the first one we as a country, or Armenia as a country, and Nagorno-Karabakh, Artsakh Armenians won, this one completely lost half of its territory to Azerbaijan, and the refugees have been since going only to the only place they can go to, which is Armenia. This happened during COVID, not even 2 years ago, but the world did not mention that. But I am very, very, very thrilled to know that in Europe you are taking care of this history with the violence that the Ukrainians are very courageously confronting, and that we are also from North America doing what we can, and we can do more. But certainly when the attack was on Nagorno-Karabakh, this did not happen 2 years ago or 1.5 years ago. So it's all important what you said. Coexistence is the key to existence.
I mean, I think we're going through watershed moments in our history, and really hope for the best and for big important changes to come, politically, socially, culturally. To go back, because just to give a bit of a bio, and correct me if I'm wrong, but none of you were actually born in Armenia.
Nor our parents, in that matter.
Egypt, in my case. My parents were born in Egypt. I was born in Egypt. Arsinée was born in Lebanon. Her parents were born in Lebanon. But our grandparents are from Western Armenia, or like what is now Turkey, but was Western Armenia.
What is Eastern Turkey today, and it was the Anatolian part of the historical Armenia, which is divided between the Caucasus and Anatolia.
So in the film, you're seeing three identities. You're seeing the guide is an Armenian who is from there, born, raised. From the Caucasus. You're seeing our characters, but we're different points of assimilation. Arsinée's character is someone who is raised very much within the Armenian community and absorbs all of the mythology of what that land means. And my character, the photographer, is somebody who's quite outside, quite assimilated, and is actually almost doesn't understand the dynamic at times. And so we're using the romantic relationship and this idea of the triangle to also show this triangle of identity as well.
And you also show it stylistically. I mean, the film's form is very much in tune with this. One thing that I find absolutely incredible with the film is that it is so concentrated. It's such a simple film, and yet it is so rich. And the way that you structure, the spaces, they belong to this triptych that you mentioned. I believe you called it 3 levels of Armenian consciousness. I mean, not only do you have it within shots, but
also I think this central motif of the calendar. So that, let's say I was raised on the west coast of Canada in a community where there was no other Armenians really, but every year we would get a calendar from the Armenian church. And so these 12 images on the calendar became quite iconographic. They were a passport to this identity in a way. So I began to fantasize in thinking about the photographer, who takes those pictures, and what is the story behind each of those photographs. And this notion of a relationship disintegrating over these 12 photographs becomes a very strong metaphor for this idea of how identity can also disintegrate and maybe reemerge as something else. So, what I miss about this type of film is just the freedom to make it this way, to make it almost like a sculpture. It becomes almost like it's not an experimental film, but it's something between an installation and a film, right? Because it's a conceptual project, but it has a lot of feeling in it and a lot of resonance. And I think maybe, and it's not didactic, it has an openness, because I didn't have to explain it too much. I could just make it and use, both of us, because those scenes are improvised, and so we were both reacting very emotionally to things we were actually feeling. Conversations, like when Arsinée is talking about children with the guy in Armenian, it's a very emotional issue for us at that time, and we were able to put it into the film.
Say what you would like about the somewhat possible rigidity of the form, because it is so structured, but it is emotion that really kind of just erases, those borders of it. I wanted to ask you how it was to be in Armenia. Like you mentioned, it was entirely improvised. Arsinée, you're listed as co-producer for the Armenian shoot.
I think it's not as important my title as co-producer than what we had to improvise in order to create the body of the work, the content of the work, that is. And I think it came from 2 places. One of them known to us both, which is the trust we had in each other in terms of working professionally together. We have been working for a number of years then, together or separately, but also about our identities. We had that trust that the difference of our identities would serve the purpose of the discovery of the film in that sense. But what we also had in common is that we both have never been to Armenia. So myself, I have been in Armenia in my fantasies and upbringing and education, home, social life in Lebanon, then social life in Canada within the Armenian community. And then Atom, as he said, completely outside of that Armenian community, then learning through, again, his education, but in a completely Canadian context and not infused with Armenian sort of input, coming to Toronto from Victoria. And so we were both talking about what we knew, what we felt, what we agree upon or we didn't agree upon in trust, but also we discovered together all these moments that actually, very interestingly, I think we took it very, very differently. Atom was much more patient and sort of, how would I say, fantasizing about what he was seeing, or kind of kinder than I was, because I think I arrived with incredible expectations, throughout those years. So how old was I?
We were both about 30s, early 30s.
Yeah, early 30s. So for 30 years, I had in my head this land of paradise, and it was not. It was just a year after
it was
collapse.
A very rough time. You have to understand also, I don't know how it was in Lithuania, but in Armenia, after the independence, it was economically a disaster. We had
privatization, right?
But there was also an earthquake that we had a major just before, and also we had electricity issues. When we were shooting, we had very sporadic use of electricity. The country was very, very fragile. So to leave the city of Yerevan and to go to these places, these beautiful sites, where we were the only people there, maybe, was very, for me, very mystical. And there's also a great mystery because the villages around these churches have disappeared over centuries. So the churches are left as these structures that just stand. Now, some of them are monasteries, and some of them were always separated. But some of the churches were in the middle of a village, which is no longer there. So there was something very, very powerful about the geography, the placement. At one point, the guide is talking about this, that the location, how these places were chosen, was a convergence of energy. And I felt that where I chose to place the camera to photograph the churches was similarly a place of convergence. And yet there was this strange energy that was being somehow set off in front of the lens by the love affair that's happening between Arsinée's character and the guide, and my alienation from that, my witnessing the destruction of a relationship, allowing it to happen, actually almost in some ways inspiring it because of my own attitude. So when you talk about the emotions, it's very strong emotions that are both in front and behind the camera that you have access to as the viewer, but in this very simple way. I mean, it's almost in its most reduced form, and yet it's speaking about very, very complex themes.
Well, I don't know if it was simple, because as we are giving the backdrop or the background of what we were feeling independently, it's the opposite of what the characters are feeling in the film. So when we say the film was improvised, actually, yes, it was improvised, but based on each of us individual contradictions. So I was retelling or telling something that I was not really feeling, but I knew about how it would be in an ideal situation. And you are telling about...
just to be clear about that. So Arsinée, her background in her community, there was a romance about what the country was. But when she was there, she realized actually it didn't live up to that. And in my situation, I had no romance. So actually I was more open. So the people we actually were, Arsinée and Atom in Armenia, are very different from the characters that you're seeing in the film. Mm-hmm. So we were acting, we were mm-hmm. performing in a way. We were not just being ourselves.
There's something really interesting. I mean, Atom, you very often look at the relationship of the medium to identity and to memory. I mean, from what from what you're telling us, this sense almost like a spiritual rebirth that you experienced, and yet the image communicates a sense of loss, not just of the relationship and of one's identity, but which I think is also actually part of the medium itself. It is a medium that captures time, it captures memory, and yet by its sheer existence, it shows its detachment from that. Something that you very much play with in the film.
But I think also that the decision to point a camera suggests a concentrated attention on something that might be different from what you're feeling. The strongest experience of that might be at the end when Arsinée's character says, I remember the moment when you were photographing the sheep. And that was the moment when he first held my hand. So that means that the character, my character, while I was photographing these sheep, I must have sensed what was happening behind me, but I chose to look at something else. So this idea of the camera being transcribing an attitude or something that's lost. In that case, I'm looking at the sheep, but I'm realizing that I'm losing something that I'm not looking at, or that I'm not defending, or I'm not addressing. So it's, again, a very complex emotion, but told in a very simple way. And the viewer can either respond to it or not, you know. And the incredible thing I have to say as a filmmaker is that was not scripted, that I had, you know, at the time we had to cut the negative of the film. So that shot of the sheep was at the end, but I didn't know why. I didn't know what it meant. But suddenly as we were mixing it, I remember I called Arsinée from the house. I said, you have to come to the studio. I have the idea. This is where you're telling me that you first held the hand of the guide. So she came and we recorded it as we were doing the final mix. And so, you know, this is why when you watch the film, you feel that there's something organic, because it really was being made as we were shooting it, as we were cutting it, as we were doing the final mix. There wasn't anything that was formulaic, or except the formula of the 12 churches. That was always the formula, that there would be 12 sites and 12 dates that my character is having with these strange call girls, or these women who are coming in. But even that was, it was very unusual. If you could make films like this all the time, it would be amazing, but you can't, because the medium doesn't allow it. But well, because you need a budget, you need to put together.
No, the medium allows it, but the industry doesn't.
Yeah,
so.
but this was a very rare situation where we could just work in this manner, almost like sculpting it as we were making it.
The film feels very free. I mean, I remember the very first time that I saw the movie, and I was absolutely taken away by it, because the form is so free, and it is almost liberated from, well, from I will repeat myself, some sort of a very rigid structure. And the film itself, I mean, you open the film with the shot of the sheep, and it's almost as if the entire movie becomes a patchwork of memory. It is, it is a really moving film, even seeing it once again for the, I think, 5th time. But apropos...
Yeah, that shot of the sheep, you know, like, again, you're seeing it for the first time. You're contemplating it. You have a lot of time to absorb it, think about what it might mean. And then at the end, when you understand what was happening as it was being photographed, it kind of goes back to itself. You go back to your original feeling of what you thought when you saw it, and now you understand, and its meaning is revealed to you. So that makes your experience as a viewer really unpredictable, and it throws you off, but it also opens you up to the possibility of seeing things not as they are, that you're experiencing it as an ongoing process. So yeah, it's complicated for sure.
Just quickly, I mean, there's this also theme of control, where, you know, in the Toronto scenes, it is, you know, your character, or rather the photographer's character, is trying to assert a certain control that he has lost, and that control, I mean, those scenes, as they are, you know, placed throughout the film, do assert a certain control over the narrative. But, you know, the ending shot, the ending scene of the sheep, it is such a heavy emotional gut punch. that all of that, leashing of the audience just goes away, and you are released into the emotional kind of force of the narrator. But we have only 5 minutes left, I'm told. I want to, apropos of control, because as much as the photographer controls the image and tries to control also the framing and the subject within it, Arsinée, your character becomes freer and freer. Somehow I believe, and I will ask you about this, but it is just incredible how your character just takes control of the rigid frame. If you can talk a bit about that.
That's an interesting observation. I don't think I've heard it before, but it's definitely a pertinent observation to what the character of Arsinée discovers when she is in Armenia, finally, where she can unleash, as you said, her very controlled structure, thought and taught, understanding or perception from far, from her childhood on, and from the generational stories, everything, structured in a way for her to learn in absence of seeing a place or the elements of a story or history that she was being taught. And now she is in that place of what had sort of structured her mind and her emotions in that relationship. And suddenly she had that opportunity to let it go. Hence her love story with a man who lives there. I mean, that man, when you think about it, and when myself, not the character of Arsinée, but Arsinée as myself, I was confronted to that right away post-Soviet reality of a small country that had become independent right after the genocide in that miserable history. So sort of, I was in shock, but I knew that if I was in a better place, I would be just letting it go, letting these things open up. So in front of the beautiful architecture, the landscape, the smell, and the vision of gardens and or Greenland in that sense. So I think. That was controlled in my head as a performer to become completely sort of letting free for the character of Arsinée, that part. And I think that was something that I did half knowingly, obviously, and half because I just performed something that I thought would be appropriate.
And we should also mention the absolutely great performance of Atosh Adamyan as well,
yes. which
we didn't mention him, but yeah. I'm told we need to wrap up. I'm so sorry, but we are so thankful for experiencing the film, revisiting the film, and for having you here with us virtually. We will continue to coexist.
We would love to visit, and we will come at some point. For sure. And it was so great to see you again. I mean, it's been many, many years. And when did you move back? I have to ask.
Sorry, are we off? I would just say, once again, thank you to our audience and invite them to continue the festival. Thank you. Okay.
Kad būtum, reikia kito. Kino Pavasaris. Kovo 24, balandžio 3 dienomis visoje Lietuvoje. Didysis partneris Ergo draudimo grupė. Informaciniai partneriai LRT 15 min žmonės.